And if you are a people pleaser, then throwing a wedding will test you, okay? It's like the perfect personal development assignment. All right. Well, thank you for joining me here. And today I am going to share my 6 words of advice for every bride. First, if you're here, congratulations, you're getting married. Planning a wedding can be such a fun and exciting time when you're in the imagination phase. There is so much to look forward to, but also when you get close to the wedding and there's the nitty gritty details, that is so fun too because you get to see your project come to life. Um, and my wedding was back in July 2023. So it's now been almost a year since that day. And I feel like it's given me the space and the breathing room to really look at my wedding with a fresh perspective and kind of just assess everything in a different way. I had such a wonderful wedding. Like I'm honestly, I'm so grateful. We got married overseas in Ireland, and we had a lot of friends and family. So it was beautiful, and I do not want this to come across like I'm not so grateful for my wedding, because I so am. But like with any journey, there are lots of things that we learn along the way. Even the top music performers are going to look at their concert and see what they could have done better. Um, but unlike a musician, we don't get a second chance at our wedding. We got one day. So I hope that in sharing my experience and my advice, something will help you during your planning process and on your wedding day. So, my first word of advice is to own your decision and don't apologize. So, wedding planning is full of decision making, as you will very quickly realize when you start planning. And there is honestly just nothing worse than making a decision and then fretting about it and falling into the comparison trap or allowing guilt to have a seat at the table. Okay? It's just not worth it. Trust me. Um, as I said, we had our wedding in Ireland, which meant that about half of our guests traveled overseas, and that was a really meaningful decision for us. It was a big one we had to make, but and you know what? We had such a positive response from so many of our guests, but it didn't stop me from feeling this sense of guilt. Like we were putting too much on people, and I just, I'll get into that a little bit more later, but it would have just saved us a lot of headaches, or would have saved me a lot of headaches, if I just walked more confidently in that from the start. Because wedding planning, your wedding, it's not just the day of. It's really all the lead up and anticipation and the events you have before. And it's really just a shame to let doubt and insecurity kind of be a theme in the planning of your wedding. You guys are, at the end of the day, spending, you are putting a lot of time and energy and money. Oh, if it's not you guys, someone is putting a lot of money into the event, and it's really just a shame to let that take over. Um, and everyone's going to have an opinion, but they are not you. And what you think people feel, or what they do feel, it's not really your business at the end of the day. um, so I really just encourage you to, when you make a decision, stand by it proudly with your head held high. When you're coming to a conclusion, when you're kind of in that limbo phase, that's fine. That it makes sense to kind of question things, but once you make a decision, just own it. And maybe for you, it is inviting certain relatives or who to have in your bridal party. Um, there's all these things, there's all these decisions we have to make. And so I really just encourage you that once you make that choice, just stand by it proudly and own it and embrace it with joy. And my next point that I'm going to get into is probably going to really help you do that. Okay, so my second word of advice is to prioritize meaning over pride and shiny things. So, the wedding industry is full of endless possibilities. So, it is very easy to get swept up in it all. And, with Pinterest, magazines, Instagram, we can go down these roads that we never thought we would be in. Um, and you kind of have to protect yourself in a way from all this allure. And the best way to do that is to define what is meaningful for you as a couple so that when you come up against these things, you can kind of measure it against that meaningful blueprint. For example, maybe you love flowers, but do you love them enough to spend more on flowers than maybe your band or even your wedding venue? Um, and if your answer is yes, then that's amazing. It also depends on your venue. But if you're sitting here thinking like, what world do you live in that I would ever spend more on flowers than my band or my venue? Um, then you might be surprised where a little inspiration can bring you. And that is really just one example where things can get far more carried away than you ever initially planned. Um, and like I get it. Like once you start planning your wedding, it becomes like this art project, and you just want to make it the best you can. Um, but just recognize that sometimes things in the moment are not as important or they're not as essential when we look back. Um, and your vision can be a little bit clouded as you're planning. So that's why it's really good to have this like meaningful blueprint that you can measure things against. So I think something that is helpful to ask yourself is, will this be meaningful in 5 years? Will this decision really matter? And if the answer is no, then maybe just put it aside. And knowing your priorities means that more of your time and energy can be devoted to creating the best memories possible while maintaining your peace and probably your bank account when it's all over. And no one is saying that everything you do has to be really special. Like, I'm just saying that you can focus on the big things first, and then you can look at those small things. It's like the jar analogy with you have to put the big stones in first and then the pebbles and then the sand, because if you put all the pebbles in the sand then the big ones don't go in first, something like that. You get what I mean. Just prioritize meaning over your pride and over all the shiny things that you're going to come up against as you're planning your wedding. My next word of advice for every bride is to think outside the box and look beyond social media profiles, particularly for suppliers. So, this advice is less relevant if you have a very generous budget and you're not so worried about that. But I do think that it's still worth hearing. Um, and so we really saved a lot of money by doing things kind of just outside of the traditional route. And I have lots of examples, but one example I'll just give you now is I needed another hairdresser because I had a lot of the girls getting their hair done, and I had 7 bridesmaids. And our venue was in a bit of a remote area. So, I was kind of stuck because the quotes I was receiving from the bridal hairdressers just was kind of beyond what I was comfortable paying. And so I ended up contacting the local hair salon and asked if one of the stylists could come to our venue to do some of the girls' hair. And they were so happy to do that. And I paid about a fraction of what a bridal hairstylist would have paid. And because another thing is anything bridal usually has like a 30% extra cost to it. That's just how it is. I think because people know that couples are willing to pay a premium for their wedding. So yeah, just kind of be mindful of that. A lot of bridal things are going to be 30% or maybe even 50% more. It's pretty crazy. But yeah, when I first started looking though, I did not think outside the box. I just went the very traditional route of sending lots of inquiries on Instagram, because Instagram really is such an amazing place to find businesses, especially local ones, because you can use the location tag and it's really easy to find lots of accounts. But I just found that all of the businesses I was reaching out to, I was a little bit discouraged because I just felt like the quotes were high. And I've never planned a wedding before, so I wasn't really sure what the standard prices were. I was pretty naive, but it turns out that I wasn't completely wrong, because the accounts that you're finding on these top searches are usually the ones with the highest social media presence, the biggest following, and they know that they can charge higher prices. And I'm not saying that they are not they shouldn't. Like, they've worked hard to get there. They're well in their right to charge whatever they are. Just know that for you, it's not necessarily the standard price that you have to accept. There are excellent professionals, well qualified and equipped to do the job, who are not necessarily on social media. Maybe they just don't devote a lot of time to it. So they have a very humble, low profile. Maybe they just don't market themselves as a wedding supplier specifically, but they are well able to do that job. So I just kind of encourage you to expand your scope. More examples from me: our videographer, he had about 20 years of experience, and we were both completely blown away by our video. And if you go to his social media profile, he has less than 500 followers and a very humble account. Same situation with our photographer. My mother-in-law found him at a wedding convention and he was amazing. I wrote a really incredible review because I was so happy. He was so gentle, so kind. He listened to everything that I asked. And again, we paid about a third of the price compared to the quotes of photographers I was getting from Instagram. So yeah, that is just a little bit of my word of advice. If you are feeling discouraged or not really comfortable paying the prices that you are getting quoted, just know that it's not all that's out there. Okay. One other suggestion I have is, when you send inquiries, you can say, hey, this is my budget. Is there anything you can do? Because you never know. Sometimes a supplier will be willing to make a compromise. Maybe they can work with you just in a certain capacity. You can ask them, hey, do you know anyone who might be more suitable for my budget? Because they might know someone who is just starting out, but who is producing really high quality work and would be amazing for you. So I will just end this by saying that I encourage anyone to expand their scope for suppliers beyond social media or the top searches you're getting on Google, especially if you're trying to be economical. Like really take advantage, utilize word of mouth, and don't judge anyone by their social media presence alone. All right, so this next word of advice is that expensive does not necessarily equal better. Okay, we are just so accustomed to thinking that the more you pay, the better quality you get, the better service. You get what you pay for is a pretty universal understanding. And in many cases, it's obviously true. It's a saying for a reason, but also in many cases, it's not true. Um, and sometimes paying more just means a higher price tag that won't necessarily benefit you or your wedding. And I'm going to share this quote from Sarah Brand Brethnack. Am I saying that right? She has the book Simple Abundance. And she says, "Love knows that whatever you lack in your checking account can be made up by investing time, creative energy, and emotions." So I think we would all do really well to listen to that when we're planning our wedding. Um, and so, one example I'll give you where paying more did not benefit me in any way was of my wedding dress. So, I visited about 7 stores, which means I tried on about 20 dresses. And I did find one dress that I really liked, but only under specific alterations. And they said that it would probably take about 7 months for the dress to arrive. So I decided to try one more store, and I was just getting ads on ads for this store, and it looked a little bit run down. It was like marketed as a very budget friendly bridal store. But I just said, okay, what do I have to lose? So I booked an appointment, and as I'm walking up the steps, I could just tell it was a stark contrast from the fancy bridal stores I was going into Toronto. Okay, there was no champagne here, I'll tell you that. But honestly, do not judge a book by its cover, because this boutique had the most amazing consultant. Like, I have never met a woman so passionate about weddings, bridal. She knew so much, and it made so much sense that she had also worked at Kleinfeld. She had worked at another big bridal store in Toronto, so she had a lot of experience. And she picked out my dress. She just grabbed it off the rack and said, I think this dress would look really good on you. You should try it on. And I was kind of like, okay, yeah, like I did not think that dress was going to be the one. But yeah, I tried it on and I was like, I love this. This is amazing. And I'll tell you right now, I paid $1,200 for my dress, and it was ready in 2 weeks, and it was a brand new dress. So, yeah, miracles do happen. So for you, like, maybe you can't necessarily afford the supplier that you really wanted, but this kind of forces you to think outside the box and get a little bit more creative. Like I mentioned, our photographer, and he had never photographed our venue, unlike a lot of the other photographers that I had been in contact with. But to make up for that, I just created a whole album of all these photos that I found of people from our venue. I used the location tag on Instagram, and I just found so many wedding photos that other couples had at our venue. And I was just like, I want this kind of photo, this kind of photo. I want a photo taken here, there. And it was amazing because on the day of, we both knew exactly the kind of photos that he was taking, and I knew what photos I wanted. So it just meant I had to put a little bit more time in, but that was so worth it. And I sent him examples of like the kinds of photos I like, the lighting, the warmth, like so. And yeah, I think that my guidance really helped him to absolutely nail our wedding photos. And what else am I saying here? Yeah, so that's, I'm just gonna kind of wrap that up. Like sometimes paying more just has to happen, but never assume that because you have financial limitations or because the price is lower, that your experience is going to be less than, because it might take more effort on your part, but sometimes all things work out for the better this way. Right, so this next tip is kind of the only specific one that's supplier related, because I wanted to kind of avoid telling people really what to do and not do, because you really have to decide what is meaningful for you. But what I will say is that the day is a blur, it goes by in a flash. And there is something really special about having a video to look back on. So that's why I'm adding this point, to get a video if you can. Because when we watched our video, I felt like I could experience the day more fully again. And I was especially grateful for watching the speeches again, because on the day, there's so much going on, and it's kind of like you're in a performance, like all eyes are on you. And I mean, there's a lot to process. And so when I listened to those speeches again, I felt like the words were really sinking in. Like it was still really special on the wedding, of course, but I just felt the words resonate with me more when I watched the video and I didn't have all of the distractions going on around me. Um, what was I going to say here? And yeah, a video really takes you there in a way that photos don't. And there's also just seeing the moments that you couldn't be there for as a couple. Like we put so much into our wedding, so it's just so special to kind of see through a video it all come together. Um, and I'll just end by saying that this really solidified my point, my belief in a video, um, because I watched my parents' video not long ago, and that was so amazing to see my parents 35 years ago walking down the aisle before us four kids, and to see their close friends and family with them. And some of those people are a lot, sadly, are not here with us today anymore. And while that was really sad to see, it also made that video so much more precious. So if there's any vendor or supplier related advice I can give you, is to make room for a video. Okay, it doesn't need to be some like Taylor Swift music video. Okay, like it doesn't need to be anything super fancy. Like obviously my parents' wedding video from 35 years ago was not, but it still did the job in just taking you back there. And so you just need someone who can take you back there when it's all over. So that's all I have to say about getting a wedding video. It's worth it. Okay, finally, my last word of advice for every bride and couple is to be helpful, but don't people please. Okay, so this one is kind of similar to my first point about owning a decision and not apologizing, but they're slightly different. So it's one thing to be helpful and another to people please. And if you are a people pleaser, then throwing a wedding will test you. Okay, it's like the perfect personal development assignment. You need to build your armor against caring so much what others say and think. Just trust me, I would know. And so, as I said, we had an international wedding, And so there were a lot of things I had to grapple with, like being told that it was too much of a like it was too far. Certain relatives couldn't make it. It was too costly. And I understood all these things. Um, and there were compelling reasons for us to just say, you know what, let's not bother. Let's just, we'll do a small wedding and not put pressure on people. Or we will just have our ceremony on site instead of going to the church because it's just too much of a hassle to get people to the church and then back to the venue. We could have made those choices, but then we would have compromised on doing something really meaningful for us. And you know what? A lot of time we're guessing how people feel, like, and we kind of make things bigger than they are. And I'll give you another example where people pleasing like really did backfire on me. I wouldn't say really backfired, but no one was really better off. So my bridesmaids wore various shades of pink, and I was so happy with the turnout. They did an amazing job. But I won't lie, like the reason that I just gave them shades to choose from and just said, pick your own dress, is because I was worried about making anyone uncomfortable by wearing a certain dress, a certain material, or buying a dress that was not at their price point. And they all did amazing, but I think that it just in the end stressed the girls out because my one friend bought like 5 dresses because she was worried about finding the right one. They worried about getting the right shade. They didn't want to have their dress stand out amongst the others. And I was thinking that I was like making this decision to be helpful. I was like, oh, it's going to be so easy. They just get to pick a dress. But it was honestly more stressful for them than I think that I intended, and it probably would have just been better for everyone if I just picked a dress or at least picked a store. Okay, like, because being on the other end, like, it's actually a relief to not worry about an outfit for a wedding. Like, it's sometimes it's like worth paying that high cost. You're like, okay, I'm done, I'm good, my outfit's done. um Anyways, the girls, they looked amazing. Like, I'm sorry to put you through that. And like, no one is saying not to care. It's courtesy and etiquette to give your time, provide resources, and help people navigate your wedding. But don't bend over backwards and change plans, especially the ones that are meaningful. And if you do change your mind, just make sure that it is a change in your heart. Because something else I realized, and this is the last thing I'll say. So after I got married, I had a couple other friends' weddings. And when I started to be like the recipient, when I started to be in the bridesmaid or the guest, like, I just, people want you to have a good time. People want you to receive the love you're getting. They want you to enjoy your wedding. At least the people that love you feel that way. They want you to enjoy your time. And hopefully that's most people coming to your wedding. So if there's something I wish I could go back on and tell myself, it's like, just relax. Just receive the love, embrace the good times that you will literally never get again in this way. There's still going to be amazing times after your wedding, obviously, but you're never going to get those amazing times in this way. So that's it for me for my wedding advice. I wish you the most amazing wedding journey from planning to the day of, and I just hope that you left here with something helpful and enjoy all of it.